I was quite young when I first arrived in Bradford. Not as young as John, and not actually as young as I was in that picture.
What's the picture from,
University Challenge.
No, it was a school's quiz programme, which was broadcast on Scottish television many, many years ago, when I was young. But I arrived here full of ideas and ideals, and looking back from the more cynical perspective of 20 years further down the line, it's quite hard for me to think about if I've actually achieved anything in all that time. But I think there is one claim that I would make, and that's why I'm here today. So we have a huge potential in the environment we have. Other people have alluded to this. We've always had one of the highest prevalences of diabetes in the country, and it now exceeds 10%. Now, that's not my achievement, unless in terms of keeping myself in work. We have this predominantly bi-ethnic population, so there are internal comparisons within any population that we care to study in this city. But our service, our clinical service, sees the whole range of diabetes-related issues. And so all types of diabetes are represented in our clinics, including most of the rare genetic types, pancreatic disease, other types of diabetes. There's a high prevalence of obesity in Bradford, of course. Pregnancy rates are among the highest in the country, and many of those women get diabetes, so we look after them. And we have the full range of diabetic complications. So there's plenty to work with. But when I came to Bradford, there was no research in diabetes going on whatsoever. So we had to set about changing that, because I'd arrived with an MD. I hadn't done particularly good quality research, but I had learned how to do research. I had learned how to use and abuse statistics. So I felt that I had something that I could do, and I had a population to work with. And sometimes that's a matter of initiative, sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's just being in the right place at the right time. But in 2001, we were able to apply for R&D seed corn funding. And that meant that from nothing, we were able to try and build something. And that's much harder to do nowadays, but we were very fortunate in our timing. And so the first thing I did was employ a research nurse, and I was very fortunate that I was able to recruit an outstanding research nurse, and we've had a succession of outstanding research nurses ever since. And we got interest from local academics. I mean, one of the basic scientists from Bradford University fairly soon came knocking on my door and she said, I've got a PhD student, we need blood from diabetic patients, you've got diabetic patients, how about it? And we published 3 papers on the back of that. And we were able to start developing opportunities for commercial studies, and we've worked with a number of industry partners over the years. Sometimes it's felt like serial monogamy, but we've been a bit more broad-minded than that for the most part. And then there has come, and we've been part of, and an active part of, the development of the local and national research networks as they've evolved. And we have some natural connections that have arisen almost by default, obstetrics, renal, vascular, and others, but others that we've developed, particularly in research or in intellectual development terms. Then the Institute has been instrumental in advancing research in Bradford. I mean, without John, most of us wouldn't be here. So he deserves enormous credit for that, and Tracy and the rest of the team as well. We've got links with local primary care, and in research terms, that's an underdeveloped resource, but we keep working on that, or trying to. The local universities, the wider NHS, other UK academic institutions, particularly Nottingham University that we've worked with, and the pharmaceutical industry links that have evolved over the years. And within our department, we've got a multidisciplinary clinical team, and they're an enormous resource of both ideas and inspiration and enthusiasm. And some of our recent foot trials have been enormously successful, and we've been among the top recruiters in those studies, largely because of the enthusiasm of the podiatrists who've just embraced this notion of new ideas, new research, new developments. And that is in both academic and industry studies. So that the whole department has engaged with the notion of developing intellectually, developing questions, developing ideas, and using research as a tool to develop those. And of course, we have our patients. I mean, without those, we wouldn't be able to do any of this. And our patients are very loyal, and they're also very trusting. We have to stop patients from going and signing the consent forms at home because they're so keen to get started in studies. And sometimes when I take patients' consent, I have to say, and have you read the information sheet? Have you the 30-page document that you've been given? Oh, well, I read the first few pages, but we trust you. We'll just let you get on with it. And you have to say, no, you've got to do this properly. But they do trust us. So we have, and we just totted up the other day, Joe and I, the figures for the last few years, and we've recruited 183 patients to studies in the last 3 years, and that's a mixture of academic and industry studies, and that's exceeded our NIHR targets. And I think you have to have a mixed economy. So we've contributed and collaborated with academic studies and the industry-led studies, and we have from time to time, although not so much recently, generated our own studies. And we have contributed to, in a small way, to some of the Bourne and Bradford work locally. And for our department is entirely NHS. There are 4 consultants, and we've got a small body of people. So I think we probably are just about punching above our weight in managing to average at least 1 published paper a year. And I've lost count of the number of conference presentations. It's something in excess of 50. But our registrars submit posters, and we've given talks and things. And occasionally, 4 or 5 times a year, I act as a referee for academic journals or funding bodies. And I think this is based on the ethos, and this is what I'm aiming to take the credit for, that to have fostered this culture of predominantly clinical curiosity within the clinical service. The research staff are embedded within that clinical service. They are part of the service, and so the relationship is there, and the flow of information and ideas is back and forward. And we develop ideas. Patients ask us interesting questions, and we go and try and find out the answer. We're trying to extend our knowledge to treat those patients and other patients better, and to explore new resources. And so for patients and for us to have access to new drugs that are being developed. And we've done studies from phase 1B up to phase 4 with industry initiators, and new technologies, new insulin pumps, new devices. Those are all of interest to us because they are potentially the future for our patients. And I tend to give priority to interesting questions. I'm more interested in is this study interesting rather than is this study potentially lucrative, because there are no lucrative studies nowadays. But they have to be aligned to our clinical practice and values, because we have a responsibility to our patients. Our relationship with these patients doesn't end when the study ends. It's an ongoing relationship, and as I say, they trust us. So we have to be ethical about it, and we have to be consistent and pragmatic. I have turned down studies because the comparator device or the comparator drug being used is something that we wouldn't use in our normal clinical practice. So if I wouldn't use it on my clinic patients, why should I use it on research patients? Different if it's the study drug, because that's the agent being examined. And we've had to learn to manage productive periods, which are generally fairly easy to manage because the funding is coming in and the nurses have got plenty to do. But we do have fallow periods where there is less for people to be doing. But we've managed to maintain the staff body quite effectively, certainly in the last few years. So sometimes the best vines grow on stony hillsides. But I think it's all about ideas and carrying on learning. So that's my potted philosophy of a very parochial world. Thank you.